the future of financial services, I am thrilled. We will be hearing from Sheena Allen, founder and CEO of Capway, which creates financial opportunities for the unbanked and underbanked by bridging the gap to today's cashless economy. We'll also hear from Travis Holloway, founder and CEO of Solo Funds, which focuses on redefining what a community bank could be. And we'll hear from one of M13's portfolio company founders, Elizabeth Stark, founder and CEO of Lightning Labs, a company that is building faster, cheaper, layer 2 Bitcoin to enable users to send and receive money more efficiently than ever before, to bridge the world of open source software and the next generation of Bitcoin financial software. Karl Alomar, my colleague and our partner at M13, will be moderating. Similar to past sessions, we will leave time at the end for questions. And you're all here. Karl, take it away.
Lana, I feel fully energized and ready for this great conversation. Elizabeth, Sheena, Travis, welcome. I'm very excited to have this conversation because I think we really talk a lot at M13 about the future of financial services and how financial services will change over time. And I think the one consistent theme that we always discuss is this idea of democratizing the institutional banking environment. And it seems like the three of you have all approached that in very different ways. Elizabeth, in terms of looking at, fully alternative currency solutions around Bitcoin. Sheena taking kind of what's traditionally a institutional banking environment and really localizing it and making it very personal to the user on their phones. And Travis, obviously, focusing on liquidity within the community and allowing that liquidity to be shared and borrowed and loaned across the community. And all very, very different approaches to the idea of, where does banking fail us and what are the things that we can do to provide very personalized opportunities for people to solve those failures. So really, really excited to have you all here. I think, just to kick off, on the basis of what I just said, I'd love to understand how each of you think about, current institutional, let's call it, the legacy institutional banking options that are out there and what's really broken with them. Why don't they work? Why do we need disruptive solutions? And maybe, Sheena, I'd love maybe for you to start, since, you're really taking what's probably more traditional banking techniques, but applying it on a much more personal level. So maybe you can give us a thought, and then I'd love to hear from Travis and Elizabeth about the same concept.
So the main thing that we look into is the fact that this next generation, we do not walk into bank branches. That's probably a super important piece to this. I can't tell you the last time I walked into a bank branch. But the other piece of that is technology, the infrastructure that you're able to build through technology. You can do things that was done to traditional banking system that is no longer needed. So the charge for overdraft fees, the charge for minimum balance fees, not giving them innovative services that are more customized to who they are, you can do through technology. And we want to be able to do that so that regardless of where you're located, if you're in the banking desert, if you're in an urban area, you can have access to financial services from the convenience of your phone.
And great. And Travis, your thoughts? I know that you're really servicing a community that definitely is underbanked and don't always have the options. And so from your perspective, like what brought this on? What makes you feel, what's the breakage in the banking system that really requires a solution like yours in terms of community lending?
Yeah, I mean, the real opportunity that I see in the banking space is that, banks just don't provide loans for $50 for people who need gas money. They're not providing $100 for the single mother who needs to pay a utility bill, the college student who needs $200 for a textbook. These are not opportunities that, you can leverage a traditional bank for. So the opportunities that do exist are usually borrowing from friends and family, which puts a lot of stress on personal relationships. It's very embarrassing to ask for that type of capital. Or you're going to go take a predatory payday loan. And as Sheena mentioned, you have these financial deserts in rural communities and inner city communities where the only institution, if you will, that's, in the neighborhood is a payday lender or a check cashing institution, which is charging absorbent rates for capital or just to even, cash a check. So we found an opportunity where, we knew that this was not being provided by traditional banks. And really the focus for us was, hey, there's a significant amount of capital that's already in our communities. There's a significant number of people who are looking to deploy capital to earn returns and want to have a social impact, especially in a post-COVID environment where people have been negatively impacted from furloughs, layoffs, and being, cut completely. So what if I was able to leverage my capital to help someone during this time of need where 60% of people work paycheck to paycheck. 78% of people work paycheck to paycheck, but 60% of American workers are hourly workers. And with the cuts to retail and hospitality, there's a significant opportunity here for us to take some of the capital that we have as individual people and leverage that to help people from taking predatory loans.
And there's some interesting similarities, which I'm going to tie between what you do and what Elizabeth's doing. Very, very different worlds, but some similar, thoughts on liquidity and community. But Elizabeth, I know you've really taken your business down an approach which is much more global and much more focused on the underlying foundations of our financial systems. I'd love to get your thoughts on, whereby maybe Sheena and Travis are, doing evolutionary changes. Bitcoin as a platform is really a revolutionary change to the financial institutions. So what do you think drives that? What are the key areas where you think, fiat or, currency financing is broken?
Yeah, first of all, I just want to say it's really great to be here. I really appreciate getting to talk with the M13 community, all the investors, all of that. It was really cool to hear what Sheena and Travis are working on. I couldn't agree more. Going into a bank branch just feels so like 20th century. And even the ability for communities to come together. We have all of these systems that are really legacy institutions, but haven't adapted to the new world that we inhabit. And 2020 has been quite the year thus far, but in the age of COVID, we're experiencing such rapid change. So at Lightning Labs, we're building technology related to Bitcoin, but at a higher level, I would say the goal is to really rethink the entire system as it stands. So for example, today in the US, I still, send people a paper check sometimes. And I think that's wild. It's 2020 and I'm sending somebody a piece of paper that they're then maybe going to bring to a branch, which is not fun, or use their phone to cash. If I want to send a friend in Brazil, so I have a bunch of friends over there, $20. Well, how am I going to do that? And the fees would probably be 50% of what I'm trying to send. And there's a very large, say, remittance market out there. So my take is, and the technology that we're building is, what if we could rethink these systems from the ground up and make it as easy to send money or value as it is to send somebody, say, a photo in an application, be it email, text, WhatsApp, any of these applications anywhere around the world. And what if we could build applications that could integrate this technology? So really thinking about, what if we took the internet and then applied that to money and value and enabled all these new applications and use cases for people around the world to easily access it?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because when I look at your business and Travis's business, both of them, and Sheena, I'm not. I think your business does lean somewhat on kind of underlying banking, but with Elizabeth and Travis, it feels as though, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sheena, but it feels as though you're really relying on the community themselves to create the liquidity in your markets, and so it really puts the power of money in the hands of the people. And so, is there something to that? I mean, obviously they're in the total ends of the spectrum on that front. And Sheena, again, I'd love your thoughts if you see this playing into what you're doing at Capway as well. But what are the thoughts about the power of the transaction and the power of the liquidity living in the hands of the community rather than in the hands of regulated underlying financial institutions? And either one, Travis, maybe you want to kick off with the thought.
I can jump in. I think what it does is it provides a lot more flexibility to have more say so over the terms that you get, right? And to have more say so over what how much you borrow, what are the terms of the loan. And for us, we actually empower borrowers to create their own terms in the marketplace. And because it is a marketplace, then the individuals in the marketplace determine who gets funded and when. But the powerful piece of that is that a borrower isn't subject to predatory lending tactics because they actually can create their own terms. But of course, we put barriers to make sure that someone who may not be as financially literate as some others don't figure out ways to harm themselves. But for us, it was, well, traditional institutions aren't an option. They're used to hearing the word no on a regular basis. There's a lack of trust with traditional institutions as well, particularly with the millennial demographic and future generations to come, because I graduated during the middle of the downturn back in 2008 to 10, and everyone told me that it was the bank's fault that the job market was so tough. So with that said, I know people who have a few $1,000s in their Venmo account, but they really don't have much money in their traditional bank account. So there's just a very different way that we are, we're functioning and evolving in the world from a financial perspective today. And I think that there's much more of a ideology around, like, there is a community, right? And if we could leverage the community, we can have more of our, we can borrow more on our own terms. We can lend on our own terms. We can know exactly who we deploy capital to. And we just have a lot more power and leverage. And I think that that's what's been really driving our business thus far.
Great. And Elizabeth, obviously on your platform, it's really driven and owned by the network. It's so disaggregated, and the level of regulation is just so different to traditional banking. I love your thoughts on that aspect of it, and how what you think about kind of where the power should live, and who should really own the power of the wallet.
Definitely. So, in the early days of the internet, people would have asked, well, who controls the internet? Who's the CEO of the internet? And it turned out it was this open, decentralized network that anybody could build on top of. And I don't know if there are folks in the audience that were on like CompuServe, or I'm sure AOL, Prodigy, but those were top-down corporations that did have a CEO that did control AOL keywords back in the day. But ultimately, it was the internet that won out because anybody could build an application on top of it. You didn't have to get AOL's permission in order to build something. And we've seen, Wikipedia is an example of a site. Jimmy Wales is an old friend of mine, the creator. He often, asks for donations on the site. But to me, that is the beauty of what the internet enabled, right? The ability to access knowledge in ways that, especially around the world, would have never been possible previously. It's going to be somewhat of a wild west, especially in the early days, but there are also so many potentially and already positive benefits of equal access. It's about democratization, and it's about a platform that anybody can build on top of. So I'm really involved in international communities. And for the people building on our technology, which is this layer 2, layer on top of Bitcoin, you can think of it as kind of a Visa network for Bitcoin, but nobody controls it. We've got, say, developers in Venezuela that are building interesting technologies. Venezuela, unfortunately, has a huge amount of hyperinflation. We have communities in the Philippines that are using this technology to earn small amounts of money, where previously, if they were to earn, say, perform tasks for 15 minutes a day, and somebody were to pay them out from US dollars, this current system doesn't even allow for that. So to me, the power of this technology is it is so flexible, and it provides the ability for people to build new use cases, much like the internet did.
Great. And Sheena, I'd love your thoughts in terms of the direction. What do you see in the separation from being tied to kind of an institutional backbone versus the opportunity to figure out liquidity outside of the traditional sense? Do you think that that's, how do you see that fitting into the future of financial services as a whole, as you kind of hear what Travis and Elizabeth are working on and what they're trying to do?
Especially, Travis mentioned it's more reliant on the community, whereas you don't have to go based off like what the bank said. They say yes, they say no. It's a community piece. And that's something we do with our savings account. So at Capway, when you get a savings account, you can create goals. So let's say you create a goal for $150 for a textbook, and you saved up $90, but you need that textbook tomorrow, and you just haven't been able to save up enough, of your rounded up dollars to, get that textbook. We allow you to ask the community to say, hey, look, I've done the work. I've saved $90. I can't get to it by the time I need this textbook for school next week. You can easily ask you can tweet it out, you can text a friend, you can email somebody in your community. So I think without question, we're going to be moving away from the way that things have been done in traditional banking, and we're going to rely more on the community and the way we're building through technology. That traditional banking won't be as strong as it is now.
Do you think that's where the disruption is? Do you think that's where you're able to kind of disrupt traditional banking because of this flexibility and kind of the unique way in which you have a relationship with your customers? Kind of putting words in your mouth, but
no, I for sure is, as I mentioned, millennials and Gen Z for one is a completely different breed of of people. Like the way we think, the way that we, my grandmother, she loves me to death, but she'll download Capway, but she still wants to walk into the branch. She wants to like look somebody in their face and hand them her check, and that's fine. But for the 18-year-old who is already working at McDonald's and really trying, and maybe their mom or their dad is already working 2 or 3 jobs too, there's gonna be way more options for them going forward, because people like everybody on this panel, we realize that they need a better opportunity than what traditional banks have given us, and people like us are building those platforms.
Awesome. And
can I chime in there quickly?
Yeah, jump in.
Okay, cool. Well, because Travis had referenced it earlier, and I'm really happy Sheena brought it up as well, but I do really believe there is a generational difference. And, as millennials, I think we might all be, but we're like the old ones now, and you've got the Gen Z and the Zoomers. But the idea that we haven't moved forward in terms of digital technologies, like I want a really great app. I want a really great user experience and customer experience. And frankly, like banks have by and large not provided that. And, Travis mentioned Venmo. I do know Square Cash. Disclosure, we have some Square folks as investors in Lightning Labs, including Jack. That becomes somebody's bank account for this generation, because you can get a debit card, you can have an ACH transaction come in, and it's very mobile, and it has like a great user experience, right? And in terms of the Bitcoin component, that is at its core digital money. And we call it magic internet money in the kind of community, but it as Jack Dorsey has said, it's the currency of the internet. And the idea that money can be natively digital does make sense to this generation that has grown up with the internet. And then, as Travis mentioned, kind of 2008 and the crisis, we also saw institutions crumble, and many millennials kind of went into the job market and graduated or kind of came of age during this crisis. So I do think as a generation, we don't have, I think, maybe our grandparents trust institutions more because they were more functional, but for millennials, like who knows what's going to be around? We've seen things crumble. And I think that is part of what drives people to look at these alternative solutions, be it, at the community level or at the higher level in terms of Bitcoin and new technologies.
I have one last thing on that last point you just made, Elizabeth. And this kind of goes into what Sheena's doing as well. But I think that the reason why older generations do have more trust and banks, or like kind of want that relationship aspect, is because there was a sense of community banks before. And there really isn't now, right? With these major, call it maybe the top 4 big banks, yeah, there's a branch on every corner, but most of the time you don't have a relationship with anyone there. And your mortgage depended on your social capital and your name, maybe even your last name in your community. And you were able to get access to credit, or you were able to get access to, a mortgage based off of, those relationships in that community aspect. But we've since lost that. And I think that there are certain elements that I think all 3 of us are working on, which will allow even the younger generations to experience what that feels like, because now your social status within your community and the people who know you are saying, hey, yeah, to Sheena's point, yeah, I know they've saved $90 for this book, and they're $60 short. I'm going to lend them the money, or I'm going to support this because I know that they're really trying hard. And that's that community aspect that has since been lost with traditional banks. And I think that we're finding new ways to bring that back.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting that it's kind of full circle. It's kind of where banking started and the attention of it. Very different on the regulation front, very different on the personal relationships, and it's all coming full circle. And I think, as you said, the millennials and Gen Z are beginning to figure out, how do we do this in our time? How do we do this in our age with our technology options? We've only got a few minutes left, but I would be amiss if I didn't bring together the idea of kind of the the horizon, the far off future. And really, you have to think about, how does this all come together? How does digital currency begin to make its way into, the community members, the consumers' day-to-day transactional habits? And maybe I'll just start with you, Elizabeth, on this, but you're obviously right at the forefront of figuring out how to make Bitcoin consumable on a day-to-day basis, microtransactions, obviously in whatever formats, digital formats, would be needed. But how do you see, looking forward into the future, how do you see that bridge happening where your solution starts becoming a part of what Sheena's doing every day, a part of what Travis is doing every day? And having said that, I'll say, I know right up front that there are already solutions out there that are beginning to try and use Lightning as a tool to provide, direct services to consumers. But I'd love your thoughts on how you think that's going to evolve and how that gets adopted.
Totally. Yeah. At Lightning Labs, we are building a platform for people to build on top of. And I think that's part of what makes it so powerful. People can build all sorts of use cases, and they already have. And we've got over 50 startups building on our technology thus far. And one thing that I really appreciate, and not to keep going back to the internet, but I am kind of going to go back to it in the sense that there are use cases that you couldn't have even imagined that then emerge. And you're like, okay, so this is a fun example where somebody built a website where you could feed chickens using Lightning, again, kind of like a silly use case, and you would watch the chickens once you fed them, and you just pay like, I don't know, 20 or 30 cents, and you could see the chickens getting fed, right? But although that is trivial and it seems silly, on the flip side, it's also an interesting interaction of pay to sensor, pay to machine, and what kinds of use cases are possible when you can actually interact between, say, sensors and value. Things like AI in the future, the ability to have machines pay other machines. There's definitely a future in autonomous driving and all sorts of really fun kind of sci-fi like use cases down the road. But we still have to start somewhere. And in the early days of the internet, now the internet actually started in 1969, and it didn't really become mainstream until the 90s, right? And then across, say, the broader global environment, more like 2000s. So you have to start early. I would not say that Bitcoin or cryptocurrency technology broadly is easy to use yet today. It's improving, but it's not something that is like as simple as just clicking a button in many cases. There are definitely a lot of people working on that. So to me, usability and building out the infrastructure and the technology to make it so that, these entrepreneurs are going to build like local community solutions on top of it. It can be global. It can be as easy as one click. It also needs to be secure. And I think the events of the last 24 hours on, say, Twitter accounts being compromised is a good reminder of the need for security. But interestingly, unlike cash, so if somebody steals cash out of your wallet, it's gone. If somebody steals money out of your bank account, okay, there's a way to recover it. But one thing with Bitcoin and cryptocurrency is you can actually back up that money. So let's say you lose your phone, you actually can have a backup. So it's like as if you can back up your cash. But at the end of the day, security is paramount because people can steal your digital money and cryptocurrency. So the way that I see it is we're still in the 90s-ish in terms of this technology. Looking back to the internet, there's a long way to go, but we've also, in the span of 2 years, had, if it went from 0 to 50 startups building on our Lightning Layer 2 Bitcoin technology. And with all sorts of use cases, there's an app where you can send a chat message and you send 1 Satoshi, which for those that do not know is less than 1/100th of a US cent. And you actually pay to send messages, but it's such a small amount, it's somewhat trivial, but then people don't spam as much, right? Especially in group chats. Or the ability to earn money, or the ability, especially internationally, if you want to buy things, but you don't have access to, say, a debit card or the existing system. So we're seeing a lot of these really cool use cases emerge.
And Sheena, do you see, as you're kind of building out the next generation of kind of usable banking solutions for your customers, do you see a pathway? Have you thought about or investigated the idea of what does the future, how does Bitcoin play a role in the future of consumer banking?
I definitely think it's coming. I honestly don't think it's going to be anytime soon. especially in particular for our audience, because we focus more on a underserved audience, whether that's unbanked, underbanked, working poor. The reason I say I think it will be a while is because the issue now is that there's already a huge gap between people who have not had access to financial services and then where we're going now is a cashless economy. Because we're already there. You walk into a restaurant and it says no cash allowed. But there's a literacy piece that I think sometimes we discount in making that jump. So when I have to teach somebody the difference in a debit card and a credit card, when I have to teach somebody what APR is, you have to fill that gap before you can make the next jump to give them something like Bitcoin. I do think it will one day play a huge role, but I think it will be a while because there's such a huge gap before we
so
get.
It's like an education. The interesting idea is that, generations grow quickly. And as you have generations that are born on Bitcoin and on, the digital environment, those generations become more and more a meaningful part of society every year that they graduate, in terms of their evolution. And so it is interesting at some point there will be that, point of, point of change. And it'd be very interesting to kind of see where that happens. I want to thank everybody. We are out of time. This has been an awesome conversation. Really interesting to see how people are kind of fixing what's broken in our financial world. So thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, Sheena. Thank you, Travis. We wish you amazing success, and we will be there, right alongside you guys as you all develop your businesses.